Hey guys, I hope you're all having a good day.
We will return to your regularly scheduled Professor Stick video after this message from Godless Engineer. Also, thank you, Professor Stick, for letting Godless Engineer come on your channel. Honestly needs it right now.
What's up, heathens and non-heathens out there, I guess? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and today we're going to be going over Mercury Retrograde and young Pharoah's understanding of what causes it or what happens during it or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. Here's a clip of what he's going to be talking about.
So now, planets also emit gases. They're called solar prominences, okay? And these gases trickle down into the atmosphere and we digest them biologically, and they affect us genetically, biologically, and psychologically. So, not only are the celestial bodies affecting us, okay, we are affecting them by the frequency that we're putting out.
Yeah, it does get pretty crazy, as you can tell. If you're interested in making any kind of sense of Mercury retrograde and the astrological effects of it, then please stay tuned.
This video right here is about the science of the Mercury retrograde, because I know y'all hear people speak on it. We get a lot of astrology gurus who do and don't know what they talk about at the same time. So y'all know I have to bring the science.
All right, young Pharaoh, hold your chariot. Before we get into his scientific explanation of Mercury retrograde and the effects of it, I want to let you guys know some actual facts surrounding the whole history of Mercury retrograde. First off, retrograde is what happens when, from our perspective, the planets that appear in the night sky appear to move backwards before they start moving forwards again. They don't actually move backwards in space, they just appear to move backwards from our own perspective. This is due to the orbits of the planets and how we all travel at different speeds. But according to astrologists, bad stuff happens during Mercury retrograde. You see, this topic dates back all the way to the mid-18th century. It was originally used to aid farmers in synchronizing their crop rotations, but eventually the spirituality craze latched onto it and ran with it. Early on, these pseudoscientists would attach Mercury retrograde to certain weather conditions like heavy rainfall. The idea that Mercury retrograde was a bad omen only appeared in a few publications at the time, but since then has turned into a bad omen in astrological circles. You see, as other spiritualistic things faded, like crystals, Mercury retrograde and astrology in general has persisted. Horoscopes, as you know, are a big part of newspapers and other publications, and Mercury retrograde holds a special place in horoscopes. Now, by modern times, Mercury has assimilated all of the Roman god features that it shares its name with. You see, the Roman god had governed travel, communication, financial wealth, and commerce. So, in turn, the planet became associated with those things as well. And its retrograde meant bad things for your life in those areas. In 1979, the Baltimore Sun actually published that magnetic storms disrupting communications are prolonged when Mercury is in retrograde. Of course, Mercury has no mechanism or any kind of way of disrupting our communications here on Earth, let alone our own personal lives. All right, well, Pharaoh's about to tell us about Mercury retrograde. Yay!
I'm very spiritual, but I know that we live in a world where most people are not in tune with that inner voice. So you can tell them the truth, but they don't know how to digest it. So you have to bring science behind the truth.
Well, yes, this is a generally good way to go about convincing somebody. You see, science attempts to remove as much subjective bias as it can. So when somebody has scientific evidence of some phenomena happening under certain conditions, you can be assured that it's not just some kind of crazy wild-haired idea, because it's been shown to happen regardless of who experiences it. That's why we like seeing the science behind crazy phenomena. You know, like what you think happens during Mercury retrograde.
So that way is nothing to talk about. And so we know the rumors about the Mercury retrograde. Oh, you know, the Mercury retrograde, we all didn't got hit by it. I didn't got hit by it a few times. It make you want to text your ex. It make you want to, revisit the past. It brings up traumas, got you arguing with people. Whatever the Mercury retrograde does, you have some skeletons in your closet. It brought the skeletons out.
Wait, you think it does what? It causes you to text your ex and revisit your past? Wait, why? This was not in my bullshit handbook. Mercury retrograde has been about bad omens, about things happening in your life currently, not shit you've done in the past.
Let me tell you why, okay? First, I have to tell you what a Mercury retrograde is, okay? And then I have to break down how it works, okay? And why it's the planet Mercury. Because most people might say, why is not a Saturn retrograde? Why is not that in the third retrograde, okay? Those planets travel slower than we travel in our revolution around the sun, which means it takes us a longer time to be affected.
The only way that those other planets could potentially affect us is their gravitational pull, which, by the way, doesn't make a lot of sense because it doesn't have any effect on us. And in fact, the computer monitors that are right in front of me, as well as the camera, have more of a gravitational effect on my body than Mercury does.
And we're affected for a time that may or may not be as frequent as the Mercury retrograde by energies that may not come back around as frequent as the Mercury retrograde. So, I don't care about nobody talking about Pluto's not a planet. Pluto is a planet. So if you ask me, there's 9 planets. I don't want to hear none of that. So we understand that the 9 planets revolve around the sun, right?
Wait, so Mercury affects our energies because it's closer than Jupiter? I need whiskey. And just so y'all know, Pluto's not considered a full-sized planet because it hasn't satisfied one of the requirements. That requirement being that it hasn't cleared its neighboring region of other objects. Currently, Pluto is considered a dwarf planet. Also, not to be nitpicky, but planets orbit the sun. They revolve around their axis.
They revolve at different speeds. Now, I'm going to give y'all the metaphor of track runners, okay? Passing the baton. Now, the baton is energy. The energy in this particular metaphor is the compilation of what you've done in your individual life at that time.
So, wait, we hand off our energy to Mercury when we're closer to it, which is why the retrograde absorbs our energy? How is this scientific again? What is our energy? How does this transference happen? Can we measure it? What is the collective amount of energy that's transferred to Mercury? I mean, if we continue to grow in our population, then will we eventually just destroy Mercury like the fucking Death Star? We need to know these things, young Pharaoh. Also, orbit. Again.
Okay? So, don't get me mistaken, because I may be off. It's been a minute since I went here, but I think it takes Mercury 88 days to revolve around the sun, if I'm not mistaken. I think, Venus is 60-something? And so, y'all research that and fact-check that.
So, I mean, he gets Mercury, right? Its orbits 88 days, but the Venus, it orbits the sun in 225 days. Continue, young Pharaoh.
But with that being said, okay, the reason we say Mercury is because Mercury is a planet. It's a celestial body that deals with the intellectual aspect of a person's being, aka your nervous system, okay?
Okay, this did not come up in my research at all. Mostly the bullshit seems to indicate that Mercury retrograde just affects like your communication, financial shit, and other stuff like that. Commerce, that was another one that it apparently affects. And global like communication shit, I don't know. I don't know where you're getting this from, man. So if your friends start talking a bunch of nonsense during Mercury retrograde, it means absolutely nothing as far as what he's talking about. They might be suffering from a stroke or a heart attack or something like that. You might want to take them to a hospital or something. That's probably what I would do. They start talking nonsense and you can't understand them and whatnot, get them to a hospital, call an ambulance, something like that. Yeah.
And Venus is the emotional aspect of a person's ethereal being, aka your emotional body. And so that being said, these 2 planets are going to be very important when we're dealing with the Mercury retrograde. So let me show y'all how the mechanics of the solar system operate to make this happen.
Oh, great. The guy making up bullshit explanations for astrological things that don't actually happen in reality is going to explain the astrophysics of the universe. Please, young Pharaoh, go ahead. I cannot wait to hear this.
Then I'm going to break down the science of how this takes place. So, we know that all the planets, okay, actually create a vortex behind the sun. So the sun is actually not right here and the planets are revolving. The sun is actually traveling at 77,000 miles per hour around the galaxy and is actually pulling the planets within this gravitational field behind it, and they're vortexing behind it. But so that you could have an understanding, within this vortex or this revolution around the sun.
Oh, amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong. First of all, the solar system doesn't vortex. Helical motion is actually very different from vortex motion. In this context, the big difference here is that helical motion doesn't have all the individual components interacting with each other, like, the planets, while vortex motion would include an interaction between all of the components through drag and friction. Another fun fact is that the orbits of the planets are not at a perfect 90-degree angle towards the sun, or perpendicular. It's actually at a 60-degree angle, which puts the planets as sometimes being ahead of the sun as it orbits the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So no, the solar system is not a vortex. Second, the solar system doesn't move at the 77,000 miles per hour that he talks about. I don't know where he actually gets this number. The solar system actually orbits the center of the Milky Way galaxy at about 143 miles per second, which ends up being 1/1300th of the speed of light. The only place that I could really find that was talking about 77,000 miles per hour was the speed of the Cassini satellite as it traversed Saturn's rings. Now, at this point, young Pharoah goes on to describe retrograde motion for his audience, using a crude example of a race. And it's actually fairly hard to follow. I didn't really have a lot to say on this particular explanation because he basically gets retrograde motion right, although it definitely conflicts with some things that he says later in the video, but we'll get to that here in a second. The important part to know, though, is that during this section, he gets retrograde motion correct, in that it's only from our perspective that the planets seem to be moving backwards.
Now, due to the planets vortexing around the sun, okay, because it's not a heliocentric model like they want you to believe, we're vortexing around the sun.
No. It is heliocentric. It's not a vortex. You see, at this point, I'm guessing that he needs the universe to be a vortex in order for his harebrained idea to actually make sense. But, he's completely wrong in what he just said. I've already laid out the differences between a helical motion and vortex motion. So, you can just rewind the video if you want to and see that explanation. But he's completely wrong about how the solar system moves in general.
So due to all of our orbits, okay, and the directional paths of our orbits, and the fact that Mercury and Venus lapse the sun multiple times a year, as opposed to us, which takes us a full year, they can probably do it 2 to 3 times in a year.
Okay, so Mercury orbits the sun around 4 times a year for us, while Venus does 225 days in its orbit. So it orbits the sun a little bit more than once a year for us, which I guess would sometimes include situations where Venus would seem to orbit the sun twice in a year. So I don't know. Maybe that's where his confusion is. I'm not sure. He thinks Venus orbits in 60 days, which would have it going a lot faster than fucking Mercury.
Now, here's how the energy works. Remember we talked about that baton, okay? That baton is what you do. You got deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA, then you got ribonucleic acid, which is your individual strand of codes via information that you put into the collective consciousness, aka DNA database, that we all share.
What? No, that's not how DNA works at all. There's no collective consciousness in the DNA data. Fucking what? What in the hell are you talking about?
Okay, your DNA is hooked up directly to the electromagnetic fields, okay, of the universe, quantum unified field, quantum mind, God consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Bullshit. That's what I call this entire section. Fucking bullshit.
Call it. You receive signals and information through light, okay? Now, the sun, okay, the gravitational orbital fields of the planet Earth, the latitude and longitude lines, we are all connected to that via our chakra system, our nervous system, and our genetic code. And this gravitational field and energetic flux interconnects us to all other celestial bodies.
Okay, so you think that we receive signals from the sun via the light emitted from the sun. And our chakra system aligns with the long lines, which interconnects us with the celestial bodies that are millions upon millions of miles a fucking away. No, this cannot be a real position to have. This is way too pseudoscientific to actually be a real position. I mean, I have no reason to think he's pulling it up, but, I mean, goddamn. This is some dank-ass bullshit right here.
It's called bioenergetics.
Oh, I'm sure it's called that. I mean, I call it pseudoscientific horseshit, but okay.
So now, planets also emit gases. They're called solar prominences, okay? And these gases trickle down into the atmosphere and we digest them biologically.
Solar prominences only come from the sun. I don't know why he's talking about them coming from other planets, but it only is emitted from the sun. Also, how are we going to digest them biologically? I mean, solar prominences are those arc-like things that you see sometimes in pictures of the sun. They're gaseous, like, expulsions from the surface of the sun. So, I don't understand how that's supposed to reach us. Also, I don't understand how we're supposed to digest that shit biologically. Also, how else do we digest things other than biologically? Can we digest shit cybernetically? How the fuck do these prominences reach our atmosphere? I mean, he might be confusing it with solar winds, but I mean, even then, that only causes shit like the auroras.
And they affect us genetically, biologically, and psychologically. So, not only are the celestial bodies affecting us, we are affecting them by the frequency that we're putting out. Bioenergetically. Biology, energy. How we biologically input and output energy, and how it affects us biologically, cellularly, how we affect each other, etc.
No. None of that is real. We do not affect the celestial bodies. The celestial bodies do not affect us. Our bodies also don't put out a certain frequency that fucks with other people. This is unfiltered, high-octane bullshit right now.
So that being said, let's say during a certain time, okay, you was arguing with a person, or you was going through whatever your experience was with a person, okay? Boom. Through your nervous system, okay? And through your emotional system, aka still your nervous system, because your heart has brain tissues and your heart talks to your brain, so your emotion is still a form of intelligence. So this is why Mercury is important. Mercury is the planet of intelligence. It harnesses and molds the emotional energy of our vessels. So, boom. Whatever you went through, I don't care if you lost your job, argue with somebody, I don't know you personally, I'm just making up scenarios. I'm going to say argue with somebody, because this seems to be the main thing we all can relate to. Boom, let's say you get into it with somebody during the Mercury, at a certain point in time in your life. As Mercury, begins from our perspective to come in reverse back towards planet Earth, when really it's lapping us, and it's just a perspective issue, is bringing back that energy. So remember, I gave the track and field metaphor or analogy via the baton. So the baton would be us passing it to Mercury. Us passing the baton to Mercury will be us giving Mercury the energy of our present now.
Again, I still don't think that he's pulling it up. I know some of you guys are like, oh, he's bullshitting us. I think he literally believes this. I just think that he's ignorant enough to believe anything that he can pull out of his ass, or that he's heard on the radio, TV, YouTube, fucking reading the astrology shit, which I didn't find any of this shit in my research of astrological bullshit. But still, I think he's sincere when he says all this shit. Okay, let me boil this down, because I really cannot take much more of this shit, okay? And I know that you guys are probably wearing pretty thin too. Let's summarize his position here. So, he's telling us that our chakras are aligned with long lines that channel our DNA, collective consciousness, biological and psychological and emotional energy, beaming it towards Mercury when it's in retrograde for long-term storage. We're beaming our shit to Mercury and we're storing it there like it's a goddamn landfill. I don't know what it means to biologically transfer this energy to other celestial bodies in the solar system. That sentence doesn't fucking make sense. And apparently, when you argue with somebody, you have a bad experience, that shit is bottled up into your DNA, which is then shot out, Death Star style, to Mercury. So we're not going to watch any more of Young Pharaoh's thing, but I will summarize the rest of his idea here. And that's that when Mercury eventually comes back around in 88 days, it hands off this energy back to the Earth. And that's why sometimes you want to text your ex, or you remember some bad shit in your past, or something like that. You know, I can only really imagine that this is some kind of like perpetual Death Star battle. I keep mentioning Death Star because that is the image that really just sort of sticks in my mind when he talks about our chakras being channeled fucking towards Mercury during retrograde. But I just imagine this huge Death Star battle that's been going on for centuries. And it's like the Earth fires a shot at Mercury, and Mercury just sort of turns around and is like, what the fuck? And then 88 days later, it like fires its fucking chakra juices back at Earth and just fucks us over and everything like that. Like, I don't know. I get this mental image and I can't get it out of my head. But all of this seems to explain what we would now call mind pops. This would be the random memories that just sort of pop up out of nowhere sometimes. And they don't happen just around Mercury retrograde. It can happen at any point in time in your life. All it requires is a trigger, and that trigger could be anything. It could be not even specifically related to the thing that you remember. It's just how our brain works causes us to remember random shit. And sometimes these memories can be a lot more vivid than other things that you would consider more important. But this is all due to the placement of memories in our brain. If your memory is stored near like a blood vessel, then you're more likely to remember it more vividly and more often, rather than, you know, some of the other ones that are stored farther away from blood vessels. The blood vessel and the oxygenation that it provides helps to strengthen the synapses, which cause them to form better memories. But this is all why our brain randomly remembers things on occasion. It's because of associations that we have built up in our mind, because our subconscious records a lot more than you think it does. But again, this is how pseudoscience works. It takes some phenomena that they can't explain, and then they build up some kind of horseshit explanation around it. Like digesting solar prominences to channel our DNA collective consciousness to Mercury for long-term storage, just so that we can retrieve it in 88 days. Oh, also, there's something about chakras in your nervous system. I don't understand. I would like to point out how young Pharoah didn't actually provide any kind of scientific evidence for any of this shit. That's why at a certain point, I'm just like, I'm dumbfounded and I don't have anything really to contribute, because he's just talking out of his ass with no evidence to support his conclusions. But he starts off this entire thing talking about how he's going to scientifically explain it, but he doesn't present scientific information. It's fucking frustrating. Anyways, heathens, I hope that you enjoyed this video today. If you will, subscribe to Professor Stick here. Thank you, Professor Stick, for letting me, fill in here on your channel. It's really awesome to be here. I love all you heathens out there. If you will, go down there, leave a comment with what you think about young Pharoah and his bullshit chakra, nervous system, DNA, collective consciousness, Death Star technology here. I would really love to hear your thoughts on it. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Professor Stick. Hey, also, if you want to, subscribe to me too. I do this kind of pseudoscientific debunking kind of thing all the time over on my channel. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice, and I will see you heathens later.